Society, and in particular Dr. David Shanklin for making the premises available to us, which have the incidental benefit of wine, a substance which was almost certainly discovered, I won't say invented, but discovered in Anatolia, and a great discovery it was, and remains. So David, thank you very much for that. I'm also very pleased to see Timothy with us, Timothy Daunt, my immediate predecessor. I'd like to introduce Brigadier General Haldun Solmaztürk. He's an unusual soldier, if I may say so, in a distinguished career in the Turkish army. He did a lot of multinational service in a number of peacekeeping missions and also inspections in the Russian Federation. So his experience ranges from Somalia through the Balkans into the Russian Federation and all points in between. He received a master's from the Boston University, and also, I thought rather intriguingly for a soldier, a PhD from Bilgi University on the role of civil society in democratization. Is that in Turkey or generally?
In Turkey.
In Turkey. Now there's a subject, maybe you have to come back, I think, and General, and defend your thesis, because it's a very intriguing one. I think, as far as I know, this is the first time we've had a retired officer, at least in recent years, speak to us, and I know we're all looking forward very much to hearing Dr. Solmaztürk talk about, in stormy waters, Turkey's foreign and security policy challenges. You kindly agree to take questions afterwards. I don't think anyone will challenge your opening supposition, which is that we are in stormy waters. General, it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I thank you, not only the Anglo-Turkish Society, but also hosting this event, the Royal Anthropological Institute as well. And thank you, each of you, for coming here, for sparing time, and staying with us, with me during this presentation. And thank you very much for kind words. But I have to add, I will oblige to add that if anything, with respect to anthropology, my interest and study has been on the British society. I did not intend to start such a research, but it just happened. When I first left Turkey for on-the-job training in NATO, I was stationed with the Crisis Response Section of Shape Operations Division, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Force Europe in Mons, Belgium. And the section chief was a British colonel, army colonel, and there were many other British officers. And I shared a very small office, something like this, with a British Royal Air Force wing commander, which is equal to lieutenant colonel in the army, for 3 years. These days still, there were people who were smoking, and he was a smoker. And I never smoked, and even before it was introduced here in England, introduced in Turkey, I never allowed anybody to smoke in my office, or if I was the commanding officer, I never allowed within my area of responsibility or authority to smoke in public spaces at all. So it was a struggle between us. It was a kind of Cold War. The Turkish major and the Royal Air Force wing commander, and then it was interesting. And but beyond that, the shape is like a military base, American style, and families live together. And one of our neighbors was a British major. He was much older than I was. He passed away, by the way, some years ago. He was in the education corps, married with 2 children, 1 girl, one boy. And we became very good friends, very good neighbors. And then they were replaced by another British family, just by chance, and then we became so good neighbors, so good friends. I cannot tell you. I mean, perhaps we never had so close and sincere neighbors back in Turkey. I mean, so close, and so many other opportunities. So in a sense, I'm in an advantageous position vis-a-vis you, because I cannot say I know you, but I'm quite familiar with the British society and the culture. Not only the general culture, but also the political culture, for some other reasons, you know, beyond being neighbors with the British. So that's why my primary purpose today is to share with you a Turkish perspective. Not only the political cultural perspective, but also the general Turkish cultural perspective. Not only today, but from the history. So in a sense, to provide a window, an opening, a reflection of the way Turks see the world for the last, let's say, 100 years, not longer. I have about 60 slides, so I plan to spend approximately 1 minute for each. So hopefully less than you. So I chose these two pictures because this event, or these clashes, these conflicts ongoing at the moment in southeastern Turkey has never happened in Turkey. I mean, these are unprecedented in modern Turkish history. This is happening for the first time. So,
should I try and close these?
I think it helps for the audience. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So, all these creates a kind of trauma, not only on the Turkish state and the institutions, including the armed forces, the government, political parties, etc., but also on the people. Not only on the people who are living in southeastern Turkey, but also on other people who are living in other parts of Turkey. So I believe, or I'm afraid, we back in Turkey, we have not come to complete grips of this traumatic experience. But it will come, it's inevitable. Next please. Yes. So, as you heard, I'm a political scientist by trade. So please allow me to share some perspectives. It's important because it's something you talk, anecdotal, or just talk like a journalist or a commentator or political analyst. But it's always better to add some scientific, salt and pepper. So there is a sub-area in political science, or sub-area, or sub-research area, or sub-research interest, called foreign policy analysis. And actually, what I will be doing and sharing with you today is a foreign policy analysis of Turkish foreign policy, Turkish foreign and security policy. So this analysis is about intentions, statements, actions directed toward the external world and response of other actors. So we are talking about 3 aspects: intentions, statements, actions. You intend something, you say something, and then you do something, but they may not be completely, overlapping. And of course, this is about the external world. If you are talking about Turkish foreign policy, this is about the Turkish policymakers or decision makers' intentions, statements, actions towards the external world and the responses coming from other actors in the world. So it is interactive. It's not one-sided, but unidirectional. It's interactive. So while thinking about this, we need to keep in mind that there has been an erosion of the distinction between domestic and foreign issues. We are all fully aware of this, and I will be sharing some examples. And also, socio-political and economic processes have come into kind of reaction with the rest. So when we attempt an analysis, it can be descriptive, evaluative, or analytical. Today I will be attempting to do an analytical analysis based on societal, governmental, individual, systemic factors. So one other aspect or notion or concept we need to keep in mind is about ultimate decision unit. This is the key concept in decision-making theory in political science. The ultimate decision unit can be a predominant leader, can be a single group with individuals, but still members, but still a single group, or multiple groups. Of course, the most complex and complicated, decision-making environment is the one in which ultimate decision unit is composed of multiple groups. It's single ultimate decision unit. It's single, but it can be composed of multiple groups. Next one, please. So when we analyze analytically, we look at societal issues or aspects. It's about values, national character, political culture, historical traditions, structural attributes, such as size, level of industrialization, form of government, parliamentary, presidential, semi-presidential, and others. So in general, with respect to national character and political culture, so the majority can be described as hardliners, internationalists, or isolationists, or accommodationists. One other aspect or dimension is governmental decision-making. The ultimate decision unit can be rational actor, organizational processes, or bureaucratic politics. That is the governmental decision-making is based on the processes that can be described as decision-making by a rational actor, not necessarily one single person, but perhaps a single group, or even a multiple groups, but still a rational actor. Or organizational processes based on more or less, just standing operating processes. They don't care much, more or less military type, or bureaucratic politics, in which much fight takes place. Or individual, which I believe, at least I see as the most important, cognitive processes, psychological attributes of individuals within the decision-making circles, mechanisms. That is leaders' operational codes, the way they see the world. This is what we call operational code. The way they see, they perceive, they understand, they internalize the external world. Political styles, interest and training in foreign affairs. This may sound ridiculous. I mean, if we are talking about foreign policy decision making, one outsiders, no. They would expect these decision makers at least, you know, having some interest, at least some education in foreign affairs. But this is not the case, not only in Turkey, but also somewhere else, including the United States, perhaps particularly the United States. Regarding UK, during recent elections, I was here, I used to live here, and I participated in some of these political gatherings like this, and I hardly found any candidate who had any interest at all in foreign policy. I'm talking about British foreign policy, I'm talking about would-be British MPs. So it's not only unique to Turkey. So if political socialization, constituencies, you know, conceptual complexity, this is about the interest or sensitivity or reaction, or either taking or ignoring the environment, the context. So if this does not happen, I mean, if there is no interest, no training, no conceptual complexity, then inevitably the individuals or individual leaders or ultimate decision units, you know, tend to simplify the world, and they take shortcuts. They take shortcuts, such as the whole world is trying to stop Turkey's becoming the world leader. And if you repeat this, you know, often enough, then at some stage you come to believing in what you created. So systemic is about the, you know, international environment, you know, dependence, interdependence, conceptualization of foreign policy, i.e. international role perception. What's the role of Turkey as perceived by Turkish foreign policy decision makers? What's the role of Britain in UK, in the world, in the Middle East? What's the role of the United States? What's the role of Germany in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, in former Soviet Union? What is the role perceived by President Putin with respect to former Soviet Union? You know, such things. These are important, very, very important. Communications problems, use of force, violence, given priority by certain actors. I mean, tendency to use of violence, etc. Next one, please. So these are the key concepts about which I will be talking.
Yeah.
So, this is Peace at Home, Peace in the World. You must have heard this before. Of course, this was introduced by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder and first president of Turkey. And Turkey, up until the after the Second World War, Turkey maintained this principle. Even during the Second World War, the Allied powers, particularly Britain, forced Turkey twice, very forcefully, even threatening to enter into war on the side of Allies. Turkey somehow managed to stay out of this conflict, and you know, just because of this, not only because of this principle, but because of the experience and memories of recent history. This picture from 1946. Here you see this is Göben, or Turkish Yavuz. This is the ship which took Ottoman Empire into First World War, because the British confiscated already fully paid Turkish battleships, and the Germans offered two, and then this was one. Eventually took the Ottoman Empire into war, and then it disappeared, it collapsed at the end of it. And this is Missouri. This is one of these so-called Iowa-class battleships of US Navy. This is the most famous of them, because the Japanese surrender document was signed on this ship. under the, close observation of General MacArthur. And until recently, it was in service. Even during the Gulf War, it was used. Of course, in time it was refurbished, etc. This ship, this Göbel Yavuz represented Turkey's role during the First World War, and this was the symbol of Turkey's connection to the Western world after the Second World War. We may talk about it. But this picture itself is extremely important about understanding Turkish foreign policy and the change. Because from 1946 on, Turkey started to shift from a neutral standing to Western camp. And when NATO was established in 1949, Turkey applied but refused, rejected. Exactly the same what happened with respect to EU membership. Of course, EU membership became a long story. In Turkish, we call it the story of a snake, like a snake story. Yılani case, and it became so insulting, so humiliating for Turkey. I can understand why Turkish decision makers, politicians, still insist on becoming a member, as if, even if Turkey becomes a member, which will never happen, some benefit will come to Turkey. Anyway, this is another story. It was refused. But in 1950, Turkey entered into Korean War by one brigade of 5,000 soldiers. And consecutively, 3 Turkish brigades fought in Korea. These brigades, particularly the first one, was so successful. If you are familiar with military terminology, they were really warriors. And at the end, particularly the British, to be honest, because they were in favor of Turkey becoming a NATO member, and then they said to objectioners, particularly the smaller members of NATO, like Denmark, Poland, Norway, etc. They said, look, you refuse to accept Turkey as a NATO member, but look at them. This is only one brigade of 5,000 soldiers. Can you imagine Turkish divisions becoming, as NATO divisions? How can you refuse this? Don't you see what they are doing? How they are fighting? So eventually, Turkey became a member in 1950. The next one, please. And the first HQ was in Izmir. Of course, this picture was taken at shape, but this is land southeast, the original shield, I can say. As you can see, the Turkish flags and these represent, the crosses represent Greek flag. So, in these good old days, Turks and Greeks were working together within the same HQ in Israel. Next one, please. So, Turkey became a NATO member, but in 1960, the Republic of Cyprus became independent from UK before it was UK dominion. Still, UK maintained 2 sovereign bases. Still bases are military bases. But in 1963, the Greek Cypriots decided to solve the problem as they saw it. And then for about 11 years, Turkey was unable to do anything at all. But gradually, the shift of interests between Turkey and other members of NATO, particularly the United States, started to coming to the surface. So eventually in 1974, after the military coup, which was clearly intended to annex the island to Greece, Turkey intervened. So this happened in 1974, and the problem has not been resolved yet, and this is the main stumbling block between Turkey and EU, seeming. There are so many other problems. I mean, let's imagine for a second that the problem of Cyprus has been resolved. Still, the problems between Turkey and EU with respect to Turkish full membership would still remain. Next one, please. So this is an important meeting, March 1991, between President Bush and President Özal. Özal passed away in 1993. But here he says, of course you who are familiar with Turkish would understand, he says, I replaced Thatcher, or I took her place, I took Thatcher's place. This is what Özal says, or said. I mean, in a sense, he's offering himself. So Thatcher was Prime Minister of UK, in a sense. President Özal of Turkey considered himself as replacing her place, i.e., presumably, his operational code, the way he sees the world, and his role, Turkey's role, you see, we came to the same point, the individuals, the individual decision maker, and predominant single person, and the way he sees the world, he perceives the world, and his role, and Turkey's role. I mean, so shifted. And these are some excerpts from an interview after this meeting. Question: do you think that Iraq would be better off if the Kurds or Shiites succeeded in toppling Saddam Hussein? You see, Saddam Hussein is still there. But this is immediately after the Gulf War, immediately after. So in a sense, the question is questioning the military political aim or targets of the Gulf War, the first war. And there's a suggestion in it, a clear suggestion. Would be better off if the Kurds or the Shiites, you can say, or and, you see, as early as 1991, Kurds and Shiites as entities, as separate entities, were in the agenda. President Bush, I don't think it's for us to try to see what will follow on in Iraq. Very diplomatic. Somebody must have written this sentence and given to him. But President Özal is flying high. No, I don't have a different policy, but we want to see a more democratic government and more rights to the people of Iraq. Question: the case of downfall of Saddam Hussein, the power vacuum in Iraq could be replaced easily. And have you addressed the situation in northern Iraq during this meeting? Will Turkey allow an independent Kurdistan in Iraq, Kurdish state in Iraq? Such a straightforward question. I mean, to talk Turkey, the American expression, to talk Turkey, talking Turkey. Direct. Kurdish state in Iraq, President Özal, no, I said no. Question: did you discuss recent Turkish contacts with Iraqi opposition, namely Kurds?
Yeah.
So Kurds are represented as Iraqi opposition in 1991. President Bush, I didn't have any discussions. Maybe others did. Maybe others did. I did not. Good for you. Next one, please. So actually, it did happen. This was not mumbo jumbo, this was not mumbling, this was not playing with words. It did happen. And under the direct and close and effective support of Turkey. There is a northern no-fly zone, a southern no-fly zone. Under the northern no-fly zone, Kurds became de facto independent. at least autonomous. And in this with respect to Shiites, because they were close to Iran, and Iran always, and still today, is the main source of concern in certain circles in the West, particularly in the United States vis-a-vis Israel, and in other states in Europe. Next one, please. But this was the first new map of the modern history. So these two no-fly zones de facto drew a new map to the Middle East. Thank you. Next one, please. So one anchor, so-called in Turkish çıpa, Turkish anchor to the west was NATO, and the other was the European Union. At least it was intended so by Turks or Turkish decision makers. Next one, please. So if you look at the story, obviously it's not a love story. It's not a marriage of love. If it is a marriage of convenience, I doubt still. Even not a marriage of convenience. So association agreement signed in 1963, customs union in 1995. So Turkey is not a full member, but Turkey is a full customs union member. So Turkey is subject to exactly the same rules and constraints within the customs union, like any other full member in the EU. So EU Council, first in 1997, Turkish membership was outright rejected. Was outright. And somebody within the West said that, look, this is not good. You should not do this. Why are you rejecting Turks? You don't have to. Why don't you give them some perspective, some hope for the future? You don't have to commit yourself. What will you lose? I mean, if you say, okay, let's think about it, and then just keep them at the doorstep forever, indefinitely. What will you lose? But you will gain a lot. At least you will not lose Turkey. So in 1999, a candidate state destined to join the Union on the basis of the same criteria as applied to the other candidate states. Actually, as a Turkish citizen who spent some years in the West, and of course familiar with his own country and people and culture and history, everything, this single sentence was perfectly satisfactory for me. Nobody could expect more in 1999 from the West or from the EU. Beyond that, on the basis of the same criteria as applied to the other candidate states, crystal clear, no objection at all. Who could object to this? And nobody objected. Everybody was quite happy. But there was a clarification. A political settlement would facilitate the accession of Cyprus to the European Union. In case no settlement had been reached, the Council's decision on accession would be made without the above being a precondition. So this was perceived and taken wishfully by Turks as if Turkey was meant here. Actually, what was meant was the Republic of Cyprus. Next one, please. So in these two newspaper pages are reflecting the euphoria, the happiness on the part of Turks in 1995. Here they are referring to a dream of 100 years. We will become, we as Turkey will become full member in 1998, the latest. Now it's 2016, 18 years ago. actually 21 years ago. Next one, please. You see, whoever gave the idea that, look, you don't have to refuse them, you don't have to reject them. Why don't you just give them a hope? Gave an excellent idea, excellent advice. It worked. It worked very well. And all of a sudden, more or less at the same time, I assume you are familiar with the PKK problem in Turkey. In 1999, after a long story, the American intelligence, with assistance from Israeli intelligence, Mossad, took Abdullah Öcalan from Greek embassy in Kenya, Nairobi, and as if he was a Christmas present, hacked him with ribbons and just handed over to Turkey. I heard myself, late Prime Minister Ecevit saying, I can understand, why did they give him to us? Why did they give him to us? I don't understand. He was asking. Yes. Next one, please. So, remember the meeting in 1991, March 1991, between President Bush and President Lazar. There happened another meeting between yet another President Bush and, but this time, nobody, Erdogan. He was nobody then, because he was banned from politics, and he was not even an MP. But in December 2002, he was received by President Bush. You see, and I'm sure you will recognize the similarities between two pictures, two photographs. You know, the body language, the mimics, the smiles, the way they pose, etc. You see, I mean, in about 10 years, it looks as if nothing changed. Please keep in mind, in 1980, there was a military coup in Turkey, and the army came to power for about 3 years. And then in 1983, Özal came to power as prime minister. And up until 1993, for about 10 years, he was the sole political decision maker in Turkey. And he declared himself as a replacement of Ms. Thatcher. And then, as soon as he passed away, this gentleman and the party he represented, he passed away in 1993, they came to power in 1994. For example, the Ankara mayor today has been Ankara mayor since 1994, the same person. The same person, 1994. And then, the United States and Britain have always been behind them. Clearly, openly supported them. I don't accuse or I don't complain about this. Please, let me clarify. I'm just sharing the perception, the understanding, the way we read it, at least I read it. So, you see here. So from 1994 to 2002, first in local administrations, municipalities, and then coming to power, there was a complication in 1997, which was overcome very easily and rapidly. So in 2002, they came to power. And then, immediately, they found themselves, as the closest friend of the United States, as party and as Turkey decision. Next up, please. So, these pictures require no explanation at all. But again, let me share two critical aspects as I read it. First is Twin Towers, 9/11. The United States invoked Article 5 of NATO Treaty. Of course, ambassadors are familiar with the meaning of it. That is, an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all members, and all other members would respond in the way they deem necessary and appropriate. So actually, Article 5 does not require any NATO member automatically to go to war against the invader in protecting the member or members or NATO members who were under attack. This has reasons, but still it was invoked. Article 5 was invoked. Against whom? Nobody knew at that time. And still we are wondering. Still we are wondering. Some AWACS, airborne early warning aircraft, flew across the Atlantic to protect the United States against whom? Again, nobody knew. Against America. Actually, in 1991, it was Turkey who invoked Article 5, really, against Iraq, and the first time in NATO's history, ACE Mobile Force Air Component deployed to Turkey in 1991. But even Turkey was not aware of this fact. And about 10 years later, when the United States invoked this was introduced first time in NATO history. NATO displayed solidarity with a member of the United States, as if the United States needed this display of solidarity. Even today, nobody talks about 1991 AMFA deployment to Turkey. Again, this is another story. You may not know, but we know very well, at least the military. We know very, very well how it was deployed, what happened, what were the complications, how it was perceived by local populations in Germany, in Belgium, in Italy, and somewhere else. Anyway, and the second aspect was that we still wonder why the United States first attacked Afghanistan and then to Iraq. Of course, there are some explanations, but how strong they are, the judgment is still up there. Next one, please. And then he said, mission accomplished. It was an illusion. Mission was not accomplished. Mission as of today, as we talk now, as here, hasn't been accomplished yet. Next one, please. So came Tbilisi. So one mission accomplished, yet another mission, Georgia. Another mission, Grozny. These were taken as if, Western or American, if you like, victories against former Soviets, new Russians, etc. You see the body language. You see the flags, the pictures. You see. Similar. I see, pictures of Albania, many pictures from the Balkans here and over there in the corridor. The same phenomenon immediately after the collapse of the Yugoslavia. In Albania, in Macedonia, and somewhere else. When I traveled, I used to see American flag, German flags, a few Italian flags, and some Turkish flags, but mainly American. Mainly American and German flags. So these people needed something, some hope, some connection, some bond, some security or sense of security. So they thought they found it, but it was an illusion as well. Next slide, please. So in 2007, Russia suspended its participation in the adapted CFP. CFP stands for Conventional Forces in Europe. This was a historic treaty. This was a historic treaty. It took about 25 years to agree on this treaty. Just because of this treaty, the end of the Cold War was possible. It contributed to the collapse of the Soviets. This treaty, as I read it, is the single most important treaty in the world in terms of peace. But Russia suspended, or felt obliged to suspend its participation, or Russia's participation in the ATS. Again, this is not our subject, but please keep this in mind. But this is the dividing line from the end of the Soviets, 89, 90 to 2000, for about 15, it took about 15 years. Next one, please. So, as the change started in 2007, came the War of 5 Days in 2008. Russia did not start this war. Russia did not start this war. It was started by Georgia. How could this happen? I mean, a state as small as powerless as Georgia, how could they imagine and entertain the idea that they could get South Ossetia under their control by using force against Russian army? I mean, how could they think this? Because the Americans, because President Bush made them believe in this. Next one, please. And they suffered. So, the accession partnership in 2001, Turkish Parliament adopted the national program in March 2001. Turkish Parliament adopts over 30 amendments to the Constitution. Can you imagine 30 amendments to any constitution passed by the Parliament overnight to meet the Copenhagen political criteria? But of course, amending something on paper is something, but implementing it, and more importantly, internalizing all these changes, amendments, and then reflecting them not only into your laws, but into your practice, implementation are completely different things. Sweeping reforms to meet EU's human rights criteria. Even Turkey signed the protocol banning death penalty. Even after Abdullah Öcalan was handed over to Turkey. Of course, this was one of the preconditions by the Americans, of course, they said. But here, all these sweeping reforms, we are talking about thousands of articles in Turkish legal books. Thousands. Nobody, even whoever wrote these amendments or bills, forwarded to the parliament, what they were writing about. So the Turkish legal system turned into a mess, even today. Just for sake of meeting Copenhagen criteria and becoming a full member. If not 1998, perhaps in 2006, 2007. Next one, please. So, surprise, 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 surprise. In 2004, the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan offered a plan, so-called Annan Plan, for the resolution of the Cyprus problem. It was still unresolved since 1974, if not 1963. And there was a referendum in April 2004. Turkish Cypriots accepted 65%. The Greek Cypriots rejected even more. And then, in order to reward the Republic of Cyprus, the European Union accepted Cyprus as full member because they said no to UN plan. And then, in order to punish Turks because they accepted the UN plan, here we are. Here we are. So this was the breaking point between Turkey and EU at that time. But still, the Turkish government was in power at that time. Tayyip Erdogan did not take the message because they were still under the illusion of becoming a member, or somehow using this image, this hope for domestic consumption. Next one, please. So when it came to 2004, finally, European Union told Turkey, before it was exactly the same conditions applied to any candidate states. This was the wording in 1999, you will remember. But when it came to 2004, only 5 years after, it became unresolved disputes having repercussions, if necessary, be brought to the International Court of Justice for settlement. Surprise, surprise. Each framework for negotiations will address the following elements according to their own merits. This is typical British terminology. According to their own merits. I learned all these from my British officer colleagues, and I'm using them. I owe them. I owe them. They taught me many lessons in terms of English, the so-called commando English, of course, not American English. Characteristics of each candidate state. Of course, each candidate state actually it stands for Turkey. Long transitional periods, derogations, specific arrangements, or permanent safeguard clauses. Permanent safeguard clauses. Remember when I talked about individuals or idiosyncratic, specifications or characteristics of decision makers, their interest and education in foreign policy. I cannot imagine neither Tayyip Erdogan or his close associate would have any idea at all about the meaning of permanent safeguard clauses. And for areas such as freedom of movement of persons, structural policies, or agriculture. These negotiations are an open-ended process, the outcome of which cannot be guaranteed beforehand. If the candidate state is not in a position to assume in full all the obligations of membership, it must be assured that the candidate state concerned is fully anchored in European structures or the strongest possible one. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, sir. Thank you, master. The first question I asked my wing commander colleague, of course I need a meaning. He was quite old. He was a little wing commander, but he was quite old. As old as he was flying aircraft when I was born. There was such a age gap between us. I said, sir, sometimes I hear in Turkish translations of Indian films of a word that can be translated in Turkish as owner. Do you know it's proper English equivalent? Why do they keep using it? Of course, I was referring to master. He never answered this question. Next one, please. So, open-ended process. Still, it's open-ended process. And here we are, after President Bush, later another President Bush, came President Obama in 2009 addressing the Turkish Parliament. Of course, American state system or political system had three different presidents, but we had the same person always, or the same line of political thinking or political tradition or culture. So it just, gave some boost to Turkish political decision makers, made them happy, and encouraged them to become a model partner and a model for moderate Islam in 2009, about 7 years ago. Next one, please. And immediately after, in March 2009, President Gül said that, you know, good things will happen soon in Turkey. And then in October 2009, the PKK militants in uniform, making victory signs, arrived at the Turkish border post. And Turkish state system deployed a mobile court in tent, as it was old Wild West, American Wild West. Remember in Western films, there are some judges who travel from one city to another, and then, you know, every 2 months, every 3 months, every 6 months, you know, run courts. It was like that. So their arrival turned into a political assembly, and there was much euphoria. And when we came to June 2010, in about 6 or 7 months, the Turkish forces already had 135 killed in action. Next one, please. So obviously this was not the good things intended. So many people wondered why Turkey accepted such a drastic change of policy. I mean, Turkish state has been fighting PKK at the time. Since 1984, came to 2009, for over 25 years, quarter of a century. Why they immediately, I mean, suddenly changed their mind? Because the Americans decided to leave Iraq. You see here, troops leave cities. And then, you see, this was Obama's decision. So in a sense, Obama made a decision, came to Turkey, talked to Turkish parliament, and then to Turkish government, and then in a sense suggested a drastic change in policy. Probably said, look, remember, we handed Abdullah Öcalan to you. Remember why we did this? Do you think we did this just out of friendship, out of being the same member of the same alliance? Not at all. We were expecting something, resolution of this issue. This is the only way you can solve this. So, you see, such important decisions, in a sense, were imposed on Turkish political decision makers by the United States, if not by somebody else. Because there is no other indication, there is no other reason for Turkish political decision makers, we are talking about a handful of individuals, to make such important, such drastic changes in policy. I don't mean this was the wrong thing to do. Perhaps this was the right thing to do. But if you are not prepared, even for the right decision, it cannot be implemented rightly, properly. Next one, please. But for the American policy, it was perfect. In the meantime, Turkey introduced zero problem with neighbors, not policy, perhaps the foreign policy principle. Actually, it was the repetition or restatement or reformulation of the former peace in the world, peace at home, peace in the world. It was more or less the same. Next one, please. And as a souvenir, as a present, came this ballistic missile system. It was American, but somehow it was introduced as NATO ballistic missile defense system. This was extremely important. This was more important than the Georgian War. This was more important than the expansion of NATO. Next one, please. And came Libya. Again, this is not our subject, but in my understanding, in my belief, in my reading, the Libya operation, from international law perspective, was an illegal operation. Because UN Security Council Resolution 1973 did not authorize the use of force for changing this regime. Not at all. Next one, please. So, Arab Spring, and this is the outcome. Finally, after all these mumbo jumbo, including refugees, Putin, Syria, US Security Council, Iran, Libya, etc., came to Russian and American foreign ministers just congratulating each other. Next one, please. But it was not so positive from Turkish side. So in 2012, one Turkish reconnaissance aircraft was shot down by Syrians. I never believed that it was shot down by Syrians, but Syrians said that we did it, we shot it down, and the Turks keep saying that it was shot down by Syrians. And I say, no, it was not shot down, it was just an accident. But it was a convenient accident in which 2 Turkish pilots were killed, and still it's considered a shutdown, a hostile act on the part of Syria. Next one, please. And then finally, in 2005, recently, first time in NATO-Soviet history, in East-West history, a NATO member shut down a Russian bomber. This was an incident, very, very difficult, perhaps impossible for Russians to swallow. Itself is a complicated story, but to make a long story short, this Su-24 is a bomber. It can just carry a bomb and then can attack to targets on the ground. So it was no danger, no risk, no threat to Turkish airspace during the 17 seconds, but it happened. Next one, please. And eventually, zero neighbor without problems. we achieved. Next one, please. Indeed, we have some neighbors without problems, such as Hamas, such as Palestine Authority, and Australia and New Zealand. We are really very, very good neighbors. We don't have any problems at all. But they are not neighbors. They are far away. Next one, please. And you may wonder, so what were the reaction within Turkey? What the Turkish people were doing? I mean, they were just watching, or how were they entertaining themselves? So in June 2013 came Gezi protests. It was complicated. It's not easy to comprehend. There were such pictures, but also such pictures. You see a modern dressed young woman and quite conservative dressed young woman were both opposing something. And this policeman is just helping a disabled protester just to move down the stairs. And even the media took its share. Next one, please. So the women, they played a major and the most important role here. This is promising from Turkish democracy perspective. Next one, please. And it was not only women. You see, everybody, took themselves to the streets. It was not happy for the police as well. Next one. Next one. You see. And this was the police. They were just used as so-called, in military terminology we say cannon fodders. Cannon fodders. So the Turkish police today is cannon fodder zone of the current government's political ambitions. Next one, please. And at the end of the day, Turkey is even more corrupt, more religious, particularly the educational system, and the media applies more and more self-censorship. If you are familiar with this film, you will understand what I mean. V for Vendetta. I strongly recommend you to watch this. Since you came here to listen to me, please watch this. And this lady, she was a presenter for a show on TV. She was a presenter for a show to entertain people. She is an entertainer. But immediately after this gentleman, who was Deputy Prime Minister all the time, criticized the way she dressed, she lost her job, and she's unemployed since then. Just because of the way she dressed. Again, she was an entertainer on TV. Next one, please. And Turkey is more autocratic than ever, even more autocratic than military periods. I mean, under military coup or military takeover or military, interference. Next one, please. Well, what about the way West perceives this? So, European Parliament, the recent report in March 2016, is quite strong, the word. Believes that the postponement of the Commission's 2015 progress report until after the Turkish elections was a wrong decision, as it gave the impression that the EU is willing to go silent on fundamental rights in return for Ankara's cooperation on refugees. Calls on both the European Commission and the Council to clearly stand up for the rule of law in Turkey, irrespective of other interests, and the rest more or less the same. Next one, please. And again, stresses that the 3 billion euros which are part of the refugee facility for Turkey will have to come to the direct benefit of refugees and their host communities. Calls on the European Commission to ensure that a mechanism is put in place to check that funds are used adequately. Actually, this is an insult on any government, let alone Turkish government. Next one, please. And not only the West, but also the Arabs are against Turkey now. This includes so-called traditional, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the rest. They, first time since 1973, during this oil crisis in the world, first time since 1973, they got together to protest Turkey. Next one, please. And U.S. Department of State, more or less the same wording, more or less, even there's a reference to 2015 EU progress report. But that the use by law enforcement officers of counterfiling, and alleged that in many instances courts gave prior to these counterfiled cases, etc. More or less the same wording. Next one, please. Well, what about UK? What's happening here vis-à-vis Turkey? As we speak here, as we are here enjoying our wine and kindly paying attention to what I'm saying, another meeting at the moment is taking place in British Parliament in one of the committee rooms, and the gentlemen are talking about so-called Democratic Regions Party, PKK, HDP, the situation in northern Syria, and trying to draw a connection between democratic autonomy and the fight against the Islamic State. This is happening now, at the moment. This was last week. Again, Committee Room 10, House of Commons. And the subject was democratic confederalism and the Kurdish case in Turkey. Not even a federation, but confederation we are talking about. Next one, please. This was before that, still in the parliament. Yet another committee room. Next one, please. This is another committee room before. And by the way, this gentleman, a friend of mine, was in Ankara last week. He's writing a book now on the subject. Next one, please. This one, another one. Next one, please. This one was so crowded, was so enthusiastic to participate. I was there as well, although I was unable to stay until the end. The largest room available was just allocated to them on the spot. Next one, please. So, whether we like it or not, this treaty was signed in 1920, Treaty of Sevres. This is real. This is not something imaginary. This was signed and accepted by the Ottoman Empire as well. This sealed the fate of the Ottoman Empire. This was in 1920, but actually the first version was signed by British and French foreign ministers, Cyprus and Pico, on May the 8th, 1916, immediately after the Gallipoli campaign. Immediately after, in January, the Allies withdrew from Gallipoli, and only 1 week after the Kut disaster from British perspective, of course, when the British garrison surrendered altogether. I give this as an example of determination and self-confidence on the part of the British to Turkish audience from time to time. I say, look, they lost Gallipoli. There was no hope on the Western Front. There was no hope on the Eastern Front against Russians. As if this is not enough, they lost at Kut. Still, 1 week after, they took a pencil to foreign ministers and took a ruler and redrew the map of Middle East, the expanse of the Ottoman Empire. You see the confidence. And actually they succeeded, but this was rejected by the new Turkish government, and then it was replaced by Lausanne Treaty. Actually, many people like myself believe that the Germans took this as an example. Actually, their reaction to Versailles Treaty came a little bit late than Turks, but more or less it was based on the same motivation. Next one, please. This is quite a recent one. This is an American one. Actually, this was used as a map, part of an article written by a retired American officer in one of the military magazines. But it became so widely publicized in Turkey, everybody keeps talking about this. And there is some logic behind it. Logic. Next one, please. And of course, this book, just hot off the press, just late last year. You may be familiar with David Phillips. David Phillips is not any other person. David Phillips is a very, very informed person, and he is writing a book subtitled A New Map of the Middle East, and the title is Kurdish Spring. One should take it into consideration seriously, and we take it seriously. Next one, please. We talk about Turkish policy, Turkish political decision makers, etc., etc., etc. And at the end of the day, it comes to President Erdogan. He has no constitutional authority, but is de facto president at the moment. Next one, please. So, if I go back to my first slide, and this is my last slide, by the way, from Turkish foreign policy analysis perspective, the policymakers in general are hardliners. The decisions are made on organizational processes, seemingly, but actually was decided by a single individual, predominant ultimate decision unit with specific operational codes, worldviews, autocratic political style, little interest and training in foreign affairs, insensitive to conceptual complexity, responsive to expectations of constituencies, simplifying the world by taking shortcuts, specific international role perception despite high interdependence, significant communications problems, tendency to use of force versus compromise negotiation. Now the word is defenses. Now can we watch the Brookings speech, please. So this will take about 3 or 4 minutes, but I think it's the best way to end this long expose, to complete the picture. It was on, wasn't it?
The link was a slide back.
Yes, over here. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Just play, please.
That would increase the volume, which you probably need to do anyway.
Yes.
No,
Now,
if it
yes.
would work or not. Ah, it works.
Excellent.
Okay.
The Prime Minister of Turkey paid a visit to Iran, and with that visit, after
Is there somebody at the door, or is it?
an opportunity to discuss the recent
Oh,
developments
that's okay.
throughout the tenure of Ahmadinejad and
Oh.
There's a disconnect between the projection and the computer.
there have been certain improvements, and we had a trade volume of $30 billion between the two nations. But this goal, this trade volume, had not been realized until so far, and there was a significant drop in the trade volume between our nations.
Perhaps with better start here. Let me open this.
We have the island.
No idea what happened then.
It lost its connection.
This was a speech in Brookings. It took about 45 minutes, and at the end he answered questions for about 30 minutes. The last question was the president of the Turkish University in Washington. There's a Turkish university in Washington, and she said, "Mr. President, I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of Turkey because of its stance vis-a-vis refugees. Everybody is refusing refugees, but Turkey is accepting them, just trying his best. Why do you think that Europe is so indifferent to the fate of these miserable people?" And then, to make a long story short, he said, "We have our own solution project." We told this to our Western allies and leaders, and he named Chancellor Merkel, and he said, even she promised 9 billion euros. We are offering an area, protected area, under the protection of United Nations, perhaps NATO, and behind which we will form cities. So within 150 square meters real estate, we will build buildings of 50 to 100 square meters for each family, and they will live there, and then we will solve the problem. So Brookings is the #1 think tank in the world. And number 2 is Chatham House. And he's invited there, and so many people, you know, think tanks, political makers, you know, academics, you know, civil society, you know, decision makers, etc., throughout the world, have been trying to find a way to solve the crisis in Syria. And the simple solution is that United Nations comes, NATO comes, protects us, we deploy our contractors. Germany gives 9 billion euros, UK gives 20 billion pounds, United States more, you know, perhaps, you know, 50 billion dollars, whoever, and then we just organize. We build cities. Even the square meter, 150, he said that, 100 square meter the last day. And then he confidently said, we made our offer, and then we are waiting. Meaning, what else can we do? We are offering everything. The solution is there, so close and so easy. This is the way he perceives his role, he perceives the context, he perceives the world, the way he sees the problems, and then the areas in which he is familiar with. The contracting sector. He says, we are very good in contracting sector. He says that. Müteahhitlik sector, he says there, Turkish. So, thank you very much indeed. I mean, you've been so kind in listening. Oh my God, it's almost 8. So I'm obliged to.
Thank you very much, General. I think that was extremely interesting. It was very good to have a Turkish perspective. I think very often it is a question of perspective. I personally was involved a bit in the Cyprus negotiations in the early 2000s, and for example, one of the points you made was about the question of possibly permanent safeguards. That was actually written in order to help the Turkish side, because Rauf Denktaş, who I think it's fair to say was not very keen on a negotiated settlement, was saying that if we have a settlement, then the Turkish Cypriots in the north will be swamped by Greek Cypriots coming to take their houses back and so on. And so it was written in the idea of safeguards to make sure that that would not happen. And we were told again that this was impossible, but we got the European Commission and the European political structure to agree that it was possible. In fact, there are examples within the existing European Union. Germans cannot buy property in Schleswig-Holstein because of a war that happened in the 19th century in Schleswig-Holstein. So that's where the issue of perspective comes in. Your perspective is one. I think you were presenting it as a kind of obstacle, I think, or a negative, whereas in fact it was intended to be a positive. I think also that you may possibly overestimate the sophistication with which Western European politicians take their decisions. Certainly from where I live, when I look at the TV and I listen to our leaders and leaders around Europe, I don't see an enormous amount of very skillful analysis, and I do see impulsiveness, and of course we have the cult of the individual in Western Europe as well. President Özal said that he was replacing Mrs. Thatcher. I mean, when Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister in Britain, you couldn't open a newspaper without Maggie does this, Maggie does that, Maggie directs this, Maggie objects to that. It's highly, you know, politics today, whether you like it or not, very highly personalised. Anyway, we've got a few minutes, so would anyone like to make a comment?
May I respond to it?
Of course you may, yes.
Regarding lack of leadership in Europe, in the United States, and in the world in general, this is my point of view. I very emphatically repeat everywhere, and I keep giving many examples. I agree with you. So I was referring to former political decision makers, and I believe it's still somewhere, the culture, the ability, the talents are still there. Regarding safeguard, of course I was referring to the safeguards regarding to the Turkish document. I mean, in terms of Turkish membership in the European Union, not referring to Cyprus or Turkish Cypriots. There were some safeguards within the context of resolution of the Cyprus crisis, but I did not touch upon that. I was referring to Turkey. So these safeguards were intended to prevent, first of all, free circulation of the capital, the labor, etc., and also the agriculture, and for even the visa-free travel at the moment. I mean, and at the end, Turkey came to be satisfied with this simple, trivial, issue, and even if it is not forthcoming. So the safeguards were for Turkey.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I might also say, before we open, I think that Ecevit made a big mistake in the early 1970s when he didn't match the Greek application for full membership. Because it was written into the Treaty of Ankara, and the Greeks applied in whatever it was, 1972, I think.
It was a lost opportunity.
And Turkey didn't do it. Probably the answer would have been that neither of them would have got in. But on the other hand, that would have been pretty good for Turkey, because since then they've been a bit of a drag anchor, and conditions have been imposed that if they were outside, or if both were outside, there would have been more of an even footing. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to monopolize this.
He was a poet. He passed away. Like Erdogan, he had little interest and training in foreign policy.
David.
I'm interested in your position. The question of giving up the anti-Turkian policy of neutrality is very interesting. First of all, why give this up? It seems quite sensible. And secondly, what do you think motivates them giving this up?
Rather than neutrality, I think it was about refraining from interfering in internal affairs of neighbors. Turkey was quite careful in avoiding any interference. This was given up because the Turkish foreign policy decision making, any decision making would start with a description of national interest, and then the threats to these national interests and national policy, strategy, plans, etc. So when they defined the national interest, they did not define it based on national interest, but religious interest. From their perspective, their worldview, their perception of the world is from Sunni Islamic perspective. This is crystal clear. I do not have even the slightest doubt about it. And when you apply this perception, then it's so easy to explain everything, almost everything. That's why. From their perspective, Syria represents a Shia political system, and supported by Shia political system or political regime in Baghdad and Iran. That's why they are not happy with Russia. Not because of Russian actions in Ukraine or Crimea. Have you ever heard, or has anybody heard any reaction from Turkish political decision makers regarding Ukraine or Crimea? I mean, perhaps some lip service, perhaps a little bit, yes. But not real. But because of their support to the regime in Damascus, everything changed. Because the way they see the world, this is their mental map.
Please.
My name is William Bache. I think you described the turning over Öcalan by the Americans to the Turks as sort of a walk-on policy supported the triangular relationship between the Turkish military, Israelis, and Washington. So I think that was just a reward and support of that whole apparatus. In 2009, you pointed out that this return of the PKK fighters who supposedly going to be demobilized was poorly done. I agree with you. From a UN model of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, didn't seem to have a plan on the Turkish side. What to do with these people? You get someone to come back, you want to get them back in the workforce, you don't want to be unemployed thugs. Which points out in the Daily Sabah now, which is on Turkish Airlines, I read it yesterday coming up here from Istanbul, they're calling it this disarmament plan. It's never presented, it seems to be, and the Turkish military has always said you can't win the war through military violence alone. There has to be a political solution to the Kurdish insurgency. So I wonder if you could enlighten us on what happened when Erdogan turned on the Gulen movement, which his project was to destroy the influence of the Turkish military. Why is the Turkish military willingly going on in this counterinsurgency campaign right now? Or has it been forced into it? Or is it only special units that are actually participating, like the police commandos, the special forces, the army commandos? I don't understand what's happened with the Turkish military vis-a-vis the Kurdish issue and power in general.
Thank you. First, this Öcalan, why it was handed over to Turkey and Turkey was prepared. The question was not from me. The question was from Turkish Prime Minister. So I just want to give it as an example. You by implication de facto accept their political aims and then give the impression that they share and understand and came to accepting their political arguments. It's not about disarmament. It was about political negotiations. Once you start this, and then, as if this is not enough, you order your local governors, the city governors, town governors, and the police chiefs, that you do not touch them. And then in the meantime, for about 3 years, all these people establish their own state, their own court, even they, collect money, they establish prisons, they move in tons of explosives, militants, units, weapon, ammunition. Can you imagine the Turkish army now have to use even artillery, tank? I mean, tank fire. Can you imagine? I mean, in 2016, in major cities, Turkish army now, felt obliged. They have no other option to tackle. They use tanks, and still the casualty rates are quite high. It's combat in built-up areas. So it was not simply negotiations. It was much beyond that. It was a kind of surrender from Turkish perspective, from Turkish government's or AKP government's perspective. This brings us to your final question. Is Turkish army, just forced to fight or not? For the police, yes, they are forced, and since that's why they failed, and then the army, with gendarmerie, had to intervene. But Turkish army has a long history. I gave you an example of Turkish brigade in Korea. Once we engage, all the political context, etc., it just disappears. When we engage, we engage. So it's not something done just because government wanted it, but this changed certain things permanently. We cannot go back to the situation before all this happened, when over 1,000 Turkish generals, admirals, and colonels were imprisoned and subjected to life sentences as being a member of terrorist organization, and Turkish Chief of General Staff, sentencing as being the leader of a terrorist organization. I mean, all these issues, I mean, I cannot explain how this happened in Turkey. Of course, I have some explanations, but it's difficult. If AKP's clash with Gülenist movement had a role in that, of course it had. Of course it had. The original plan, which was drew in 2007, was that in 2015, somehow a general amnesty would be decided, would be declared, and then all these officers, generals, etc., would be released. But still, they would be convicts just because of amnesty. They would be released. This was the plan. But in 2013, December, came this clash within the group. I describe this clash as fight within mafia bosses or mafia godfathers. Now, in a city in Chicago, there can be only one, not two godfathers.
Or Lenin and Stalin.
Yes, of course. Of course. It's exactly the same. So it was a complication.
I mean, Trotsky was the last.
Yes, I understand. It was a complication. It came earlier than expected or earlier than planned, but it changed many things. And again, that's why I told John at the beginning, before I started, much water went under the bridge. So Turkey will never be the same. If I come back to my original political scientist hat, Turkish elite is much more prepared than ever to compromise, to arrive at a consensus on a common basis, regardless of their political inclinations, their ideologies, their backgrounds, their parties. The only obstacle at the moment is President Erdogan himself. But again, these are not happening in Turkey for the first time. Political science, gives us, excellent examples or cases or case studies, clues about this. I shared, shortly the assessments of the European Parliament, the U.S. Department of State Human Rights reports, European Council, etc., etc. I mean, there are ample, articles, books, etc. on this. But despite everything, all these, non-democratic, anti-democratic, actions, suppression of, etc., etc. They are all preparing Turkey for a real democracy, and it's developing so fast. Despite everything, we are looking at the surface, but under the surface there are so many currents ongoing in the democratic sense, in the democratic direction. So perhaps this clash, in a sense, helped in this respect, and the Gülenists had their own lessons. I'm against purges, as you said, done by Lenin or later Stalin or somebody else, somewhere else. They learned their lessons. We need to respect this. But again, these people, the key cadre, will pay for what they caused to this country and to the region sooner than they think. This will happen. because the trends and the dynamics are so fast and so strong. It will happen. You will see.
Craig?
The Syrian war is still ongoing, and the peace process seems to be foundering. There's obviously going to be more fighting going on. Rojava is probably going to be more supported by the Americans, but Turkey is probably going to get even more antagonistic because it sees Rojava as an extension of PKK. Could Turkey be going to such a wrong direction that it becomes like Serbia versus Kosovo, like a big nation trying to bully a small emerging nation that has, shall we say, secular and Western oriented organization, shall we say? Do the Turkish leaders see this danger?
Obviously, they see it as a danger. I mean, I see it as a danger. I mean, an independent Kurdistan in the region, and including parts of Turkey, even without including parts of Turkey, it's a disaster for Turkish national interests and for the region. I mean, of course, I can clearly see the Western interest in creation of a new Israel. Of course, I can see it. A divided Syria, divided Iraq. I mean, how can I not see? The Israeli Prime Minister himself speaks this out. The American, not President perhaps, but Vice President speaks this out. I mean, why did I put Robin Flipp's book here? I mean, it's clearly there. It's everywhere. I mean, I lived here in the city. I mean, turn this corner or other corner, walk 1 or 2 kilometers down there to the south. I mean, it's everywhere. This is a project. This is a policy. There's a policy, there's a strategy, there are plans, there are people who are employed and paid by their governments to make this plan work. Of course I can see it. I respect this. But again, this is a disaster for Turkey, this is a disaster for the region, and I believe it's a disaster for the world. Because it will just change the power balance. What happened in Georgia, what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Libya, what happened in somewhere else? Look at Syria. I mean, when somebody else here in London or in Washington look at Syria, they see something else. We see completely different things. Why should we read the roadmaps? What will happen later? What will be the end state? It's about end state. It's not about Rojava. It's not about PKK fighting in Syria. It's not about Barzani. It's not about the future of Assad. It's about the end state. What will be the end state in the Middle East and in the world? I share the frustrations of Mr. Putin because I feel the same frustration. I retired in 2005. Even before, I was responsible for CFE and beyond document and open skies, etc. So that's why I went to all these inspections, etc. Whenever we visit Russians, fully Turkish team, we were hosted as friends. As a Turkish general in uniform, with my weapons, I personally and individually, without any escort, I visited all these Russian troops. Nobody stopped me, nobody asked me why I was there, what I was doing, including their dormitories, their garage, everywhere. But whenever we had somebody else with us, a completely different story. We need to understand each other. We need to understand Russians. We need to understand Belarusians. We understand Germans. We understand French. We need to understand Sisi. We need to understand whoever. I mean, the world has changed like Turkey. The world has changed. Everything changed. It's not about only leadership problem in the West. The main problem is the West is not prepared to understand and accept that the world has changed. Everything has changed. Now we speak, you record perhaps, tomorrow or perhaps 5 minutes later, somebody else will be talking about my talk. This made a huge change. Huge. Look the Brookings, talk. The moment he talks, then the people starts talking about the way, the sentences, the wording here. The Western decision makers have to understand and accept and reorient themselves that the world has changed. Otherwise, we'll keep suffering. Look at Iraq, look at Libya, look at the refugee crisis. Until the refugees started to move to Europe, everybody was so happy. It's Turkey's problem. 100,000, 300,000, 250, 500, 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million. Nobody cared. The moment they started moving through the Aegean and through the